I was fortunate that my mother, when I was probably about 8 years old, gave me this message that if you buy rental real estate, the tenants are actually buying the real estate for you.
Welcome back to the List Building Lifestyle. I'm your host, Igor Kafetz, and today I'm hosting my good friend Rennie. Rennie's the author of Wealth and Any Income. It's a best-selling book about achieving financial freedom and becoming a multimillionaire, getting out of debt, and doing it without the usual pains and aches of dealing with money. In fact, Rennie's got a TEDx talk, which you should check out on YouTube, where he talks about the mixed messages we get about money, philanthropy, and wealth. And I also recommend picking up a copy of his book, Wealth and Any Income, which we'll be discussing on this episode as well. In one way or another, because I wanted to bring in Rennie to chat about wealth, as he has a really interesting insights into how we carry beliefs from our childhood about money that get passed through our parents and the society we grew up in. But also, he's got an amazing story where that he's going to share with you, of course, how he became a multimillionaire after the age of 50, having gone through two divorces and a business failure. So this should be really interesting for you if you're into money. And so with that said, Rennie, welcome to the List Building Lifestyle.
Thank you, Igor. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
No, it's a great pleasure. I've been going through your book in recent days, and I appreciate you allowing me to do it. And it's been fascinating. In fact, I kind of started a new page in my diary or whatever note taking thing on my computer, where I actually sat down and I'm kind of looking at it now, and I started doing the exercise that you suggest with regards to discovering money beliefs, which is where I want to start, because you pose a few questions that you learned from your friend, another friend of yours who wrote a book about money minds. I don't recall her name, but you do give her credit in the book. And you pose a series of questions with regards to, money beliefs. So without going into these questions, and guys, I recommend you pick up the book Wealth and Any Income to get a deeper insight into this. But what have you discovered about yourself when you were going through this exercise?
I did. One of the things that I discovered is it doesn't really matter how much money I have. I still have certain insecurities. And the other book that you were referring to, I happen to have published through a book publishing company I had years ago called Couples and Money by Victoria Felton Collins. And and I actually put some of the questions from that book in my book. So, you can get my book and you got two for one. Actually got dozens of books from my book because that's how many I had to read to get my finances in order. And this is not an answer directly to your question, but I think it's important to talk about, in that we're not taught how to handle money from our parents. I mean, I can't blame them. They can't teach what they don't know. And the school system also doesn't teach us anything about how to handle money. And you think, okay, fine, I'll ask my CPA or I'll go to a certified financial planner. Guess what? I was certified as a financial planner. It was not in my coursework how to do the foundations of handling money, like a budget. And it's also not taught to CPAs so they could teach their clients. So literally the people we would turn to for help aren't even educated in this. That's why it took dozens of books for me to finally dig out the information and save myself. But now going back to the answer of, what are the issues that I had? Little things show up, like when I was younger, if I had, $1,000 in my checking account, I'd feel secure. Now it takes hundreds of thousands to feel secure. And, little things like that change, but the bottom line is the insecurities are still there. I mean, cash flow is good. I gave my daughter money so she could buy a house. And then I started fretting about, gee, am I going to still be able to live the lifestyle that I want? And the reality is, yes, the cash flow doesn't stop, but the old messages are still there.
Yeah, so I can totally relate. I was actually just having a conversation with somebody the other day about, them saying how they admire my my drive and my relentlessness, right? Even though I am making a lot of money, I still maintain this relentlessness. And I told them that, look, it's not something that I personally admire because it's something that was serving me early on, but once you've crossed the first million, the second million, at some point you're just operating in this. Well, I can only speak for myself, obviously, but I operate from this place of fear because one of the questions in the book is what was my mother's role concerning finances and how is my role like hers? And what I've discovered is predominantly, I remember my mom worrying about the paycheck, worrying about the next check, and worrying about whether she's going to have a job tomorrow. I remember I would wake up, she would wake me up to get ready to go to the academy. I was in the Israeli Air Force Academy. And as I was having breakfast, she was sitting across the table from me doing her makeup before she would go to work. And she would always wear makeup. She would never leave the house without putting on makeup. That was her thing. And so I remember her in front of this little mirror, tiny little mirror that she places on the table. And she's really stressed out, sometimes with a cigarette, like in one hand and the brush in the other. And and I think one time I asked her about, Mom, what's wrong? And her answer was something like, well, what do you mean what's wrong? We got cuts happening, so I don't know if I'm going to get fired today. And that vibe really stuck with me because that was the vibe she had most of the time. She was either angry at my dad for spending money, or she was sort of fearful, but that would make her seem angry. So she was fearful about losing her job. And so what's really interesting is that I was having a conversation with my wife the other day about specifically this question, and she asked me, "What do you remember? And how does it transfer?" And I was like, "Well, I worry about the next sale all the time. In spite of the sales coming in on regular basis, literally like every hour, sometimes every few minutes, unless I see the next sale coming in, I don't get the dopamine hit, and I start worrying about, oh, did my ad stop working? Is my funnel down? Is the offer not good? Are people, all of a sudden not going to be buying from me? And so one of the greatest fears for me is for my income to suddenly stop. Although in the last 12 or 13 years that never happened, but that's the fear. Like you said, the old programming is still there, and it doesn't seem to be going away.
Yeah, no, believe me, I get it. I look back at similar things, and one of them, I don't know where this came from. I was fortunate that my mother, when I was probably about 8 years old, gave me this message that if you buy rental real estate, the tenants are actually buying the real estate for you. And that was a message she told me back when I was 8 years of age. And she just purchased a little 4-unit building. And what ends up happening is that you look back on those things and you figure, well, I was in a sales job. My income would go up and down like a roller coaster. And it was very uncomfortable for me. And my solution to that was to buy real estate. Now, this didn't happen until I was after 50, when I finally started putting my financial act together. But that's what saved me. The income from the real estate, whether my sales were good or not good, the tenants had jobs, and every month they paid the rent. And so that income was steady. And that solved the roller coaster income that I had. And that's what allowed me to choose to work or choose not to work. I can't seem to choose not working, but at least I know I don't have to.
Interesting. So Um, Tell me, what was so? First off, I agree that it is amazing that your mom put forth that message, because looking back on my parents, we were middle class in Ukraine, then we moved to Israel, we became really really poor. And what's interesting is that my parents never bought real estate of any kind, even though the people around them of the same sort of income level still managed to get mortgages and put together some money for a deposit. So it took me like 10 or 11 years after I transitioned to be a full-time online entrepreneur to actually buy a place. Until then, I was just renting, 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 and that's a big deal in my opinion. So I think that's amazing, and I will be a lot more conscious now of the messages I put out to my kids to teach them all the sound financial principles. So that's amazing.